The first time Commander Kale Vera noticed the anomaly, he almost dismissed it as a sensor glitch. 3 life signs. Moving in coordinated formation through Corridor 7 of Nexus Station Orin 9. The pattern was too deliberate to be coincidence, too tight to be casual foot traffic, and too alien to belong to any registered crew manifest. He pulled up the visual feed. 1 human. Small. Young. Dark hair pulled back with the kind of careless efficiency that only cadets managed. A shoulder patch identified her, Mara Ellison, Cadet 3rd Class, Earth Exchange Program. Behind her, flanking her, if he was being precise, moved 2 creatures that made the hairs on the back of Kale's neck rise in a way evolution had spent millions of years engineering. The first was a Vrethkai. Kale had seen exactly 3 in his 16-year career, and all 3 times had been at diplomatic summits surrounded by half a battalion of peacekeepers. Vrethkai were apex ambush predators from the gas shelf moons of the Dravani system. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, moved on 6 limbs when they were being careful, and possessed a bioluminescent threat display that could, allegedly, induce cardiac arrest in species with weaker constitutions. This one's ridgelights were cycling slowly through deep violet, the Vrethkai equivalent of a content per. The second creature Kale could not immediately identify, which was far more unsettling than recognizing it. It resembled a displaced shadow given weight and texture, roughly spherical, hovering approximately 40 centimeters off the deck. When the light hit it wrong, he could see the suggestion of too many eyes. It drifted at the cadet's left elbow with the attentiveness of a well-trained dog. Mara Ellison walked like she had somewhere to be. She was eating a protein ration bar with the focused dedication of someone who had forgotten to have breakfast, and she was apparently explaining something to her escort, because her mouth was moving, her free hand gesturing, though the corridor audio only picked up her side of whatever exchange was happening. Kale was already standing up from his station. He intercepted her at Junction 12, where Corridor 7 met the primary concourse. He had 2 officers with him, not because he thought he'd need them, but because protocol demanded it when you were approaching an unregistered security anomaly, which was what he was officially calling this. Cadet Ellison. She stopped. Looked up at him. She had the kind of direct, unworried gaze that either meant she was very confident or very oblivious, and in his experience with humans, it was usually both simultaneously. Commander Vera. She glanced at his rank insignia, then back at his face. Is there a problem? I'd like to ask you about your companions. He watched her expression carefully. Most people, most species, showed some flicker of guilt or calculation when security stopped them. Mara Ellison's face did something else entirely. It went through a rapid sequence that Kale had only ever seen on humans, mild confusion, followed by the sudden dawning of understanding, followed by something that looked almost like amusement she was trying to suppress. Oh, she said. Right. I keep forgetting that's not normal here. Behind her, the Vrethkai had gone very still. Its ridgelights had shifted to a cooler blue, not hostile, Kale noted, but watchful. The shadow sphere had drifted to position itself slightly in front of the cadet, between her and Kale's officers. An unconscious movement, perhaps. Or a very conscious one. The station AI flagged them as unregistered contacts moving in a pattern consistent with surveillance or stalking behavior, Kale said, keeping his voice professionally level. They've been logged following you since 0700 hours. Mara Ellison looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, with a patience that implied she was choosing her words very carefully, "They're not following me, Commander. They're guarding me." The silence that followed had texture to it. "Guarding you," Kale repeated. "Yes. Cadet Ellison, with respect, you are a third-year exchange student. You are not a dignitary. You have no formal protection detail assigned. The creatures behind you are not registered security personnel. Can you explain to me exactly how this situation came about?" She finished the last bite of her protein bar, folded the wrapper with mechanical neatness, and tucked it into her jacket pocket. Then she sighed the sigh of someone about to tell a story they'd told several times before and found slightly exhausting each time. The Vrethkai is named, well, you can't actually pronounce it, so I've been calling him Sev. I met him in the Xenobiology base 6 weeks ago. He was in medical observation after a navigation accident. Nobody could get close enough to run his initial assessments because he kept triggering threat displays, and the med team was understandably not excited about that. She paused. I sat with him. Talked to him. Brought him food. The station kitchen doesn't stock what he actually eats, so I replicated some approximations and we figured out together what worked. By the third day, he let me run the initial neural scan. Kale glanced at the Vrethkai, at Sev. The creature's head had turned toward the cadet while she spoke. Its ridge lights had gone a warm amber. The other one, Mara continued, nodding toward the shadow sphere, I found in a cargo bay on level 14. Apparently it had stowed away on a transport from somewhere in the Vale clusters and nobody knew what to do with it because nobody could identify the species. It was starving and scared and it had wedged itself behind a coolant unit. I spent about 4 hours lying on the deck next to that coolant unit before it came out. It's been following me since. She paused again. I don't actually know its name. It doesn't communicate in any format our translators recognize yet. I've been calling it Penny. One of Kale's officers made a small sound. He didn't look to see which one. So, the cadet said, meeting his gaze with that same direct, calm expression, they're not a threat, Commander. Sev is cleared by the medical bay and has been since week 2, you can pull the discharge paperwork, it just never got filed properly, which I'll admit is partially my fault. And Penny. She glanced back at the hovering sphere. Penny is just Penny. The station AI probably keeps flagging the movement pattern because they walk close to me. They like to be close. Kale looked at the Vrethkai. The Vrethkai looked back at him with 7 eyes that had seen things evolve and die on moons he'd never visit. Its ridge lights pulsed once, slowly, the Vrethkai gesture that xenolinguists had tentatively translated as acknowledged or I see you or, in some dialects, you are not a threat to what I protect. He looked at Penny. Penny drifted half a centimeter closer to the cadet's shoulder. He looked at Mara Ellison, who was watching him with the expression of someone who had long since made peace with being the strangest thing in any given room and found it mostly fine. Kale had spent 16 years in station security. He had processed diplomatic incidents, managed first contact protocols, de-escalated 3 separate interspecies conflicts that almost became shooting wars. He had a file on his desk marked unresolved that was thicker than his arm. He had never, in 16 years, encountered an unregistered apex predator whose ridge lights meant you are not a threat to what I protect, directed at a 22-year-old cadet who named her foundlings after Earth currency. He pulled out his datapad. I'm going to need you to come to the security office, he said, so we can file the proper documentation for Sev's permanent guest status. He typed a notation. I'm also going to need you to work with our xenolinguistics team on Penny's species identification so we can get a registration on file. Of course, she said easily. And Cadet Ellison. He looked up from the datapad. In the future, if you're going to operate as an unofficial interspecies bridge officer, I'd appreciate a heads up. As a professional courtesy. Something in her expression shifted. Not surprise, exactly. Something quieter than that. The particular look of someone who hadn't quite expected to be taken seriously and was recalibrating. Yes, Commander, she said. I can do that. Kale stepped aside to let her through. The Vrethkai moved with her, smooth and enormous and unhurried, ridge lights cycling that slow, content violet again. Penny drifted in their wake like a small, strange moon. Commander Kale Vera watched them go, then looked down at his datapad, where the notation he'd typed read, Cadet Ellison, Emma flag for special liaison track. Recommend review. He saved the file. Then he added a second line. She's going to be a problem. He paused. Deleted it. Retyped. She's going to be remarkable. He sent it to personnel and went back to work.